Hey there, super friends. It's Joey from Last Point Gaming. It is still Friday, December 8th, I think, 2017. I'm not going through the connections spiel again because I just did it like 45 minutes ago. This is cast number 2 because I decided instead of doing one long cast, I'm going to break these up into 2 separate casts. This is hopefully the last thing I will ever say on this issue, but I have a feeling it isn't done burning. This is in response to the news of the bans and suspensions that came out with the recent community uproar. So MTG headquarters now has a lifetime DCI ban. Jeremy from MTG headquarters. Travis Wu got a 1-year ban, and there is rumors that a bunch of other people received suspensions, but there's no cohesive list, and I'm not digging through the suspended players list to see the data. That seems like a giant waste of my time. I'm, of course, mostly going to talk about HQ's ban. So, this is a really murky thing to approach. It is WOTC's prerogative. It is within their rights and within, their rights to do what they have done. And I accept that. I accept that there was a large portion of the community that took exception to him and wanted to see some kind of recourse for things he has said. And I understand that, and I even can agree to a point. I think going from 0 to lifetime ban is a little bit heavy-handed. Especially because I don't think the end result would have been any different if they started with a shorter ban, like, okay, you're on a 2-year suspension, go sit in the corner and think about what you've done and how you can be better in the future. The most likely result of this would have been him making a bunch of inflammatory videos and ranting and raving more, which he is going to continue to do anyway. This doesn't stop that. But based on my experience with Jeremy and my perspective from things I've seen from him, he would have given you plenty of ammunition for the lifetime ban anyway, and you wouldn't have strengthened his cause with his followers as much. But I get, no matter how you came to that lifetime ban, you would have made him into a martyr, at least to some degree. I do find it a little bit heavy-handed. I understand that it is part of the end user's license agreement with MTGO that if you're in violation of the code of conduct, they just shut you out. I still think, especially based on the fact that you were going to 0 to lifetime. Now, this being said, if I'm being fair, and I would like to be fair here, he was given warning. He was contacted by the investigator. He was put on notice that the investigation was happening, that sanctions were likely going to be resolved. He has mentioned several times that he has insiders at WOTC, so he knew what was coming before it came. So, in fairness, he did have an opportunity to liquidate his MTGO collection if this went sideways. So, actually, them seizing his collection, I can't really even complain about that. Because this has been going on for, 2 weeks. I guess around that time period. I don't know when exactly WOTC contacted him and told him he was being investigated. But, smart money would have been on to liquidate then, because he had to know something was coming. And even if it was only a 2-year suspension, between the concerns that MTG Arena is going to take over MTG Online. Now, WOTC has officially said that is not their intended purpose for developing MTG Arena, but they have been kind of careful in their statements. And honestly, MTG Arena does look super skippy. There's a lot of cool animations and sound effects and shit. Way cooler than you get on MTG Online. So if they end up in a position where a lot of people are participating with Arena and have kind of dropped support for MTGO, and MTGO ends up costing them money to keep maintaining and keep the servers up, they will eventually kill it off. And it may not be their intended trajectory, but it could, in fact, result in them cutting support for MTG Online and converting over. So, with that being said, with, the way card prices fluctuate so bad, though I hear it's a bit more stable on online, but again, standard cards that aren't going to be played in any other format are only worth money when they're in standard. Even if the expectation was a year and a half to 2 year suspension, he probably should have thought more carefully about liquidating his stuff. So I'm actually glad I didn't let that other one cast, because now that I've had time to kind of back down and clear the emotions out and think about it, he did have warning. It wasn't like Christine Sprinkle made a tweet 2 days later, out of nowhere they said, guess what, buddy, you're lifetime banned, you've been kicked out of MTGO, we have seized your digital collection. He knew it was coming. So if he wanted to liquidate that stuff, he had an opportunity to do so. I will grant WOTC that before they issue suspensions and bans, as far as I'm aware, there is almost always an investigation. That the party under investigation is notified, and there is a time period between when they're notified and when a final verdict is rendered. Even in cases of cheating and everything else, there is a period of investigation. But I still feel the lifetime ban was just a little... It definitely sets a hard line, which I'm not necessarily opposed to. I would like to see this hard line enforced across the board, though. I would like to see, if this is the standard they are going to follow henceforth, that communication on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, is taken into account on your DCI status. That good guy members of the community that engage in toxic rhetoric because the person they're dealing with, they have determined, isn't worth them treating them the way that they want other members of the community to be treated, I think that needs to be investigated too. I think when you run around and call everybody who disagrees with you a Nazi, or take personal attacks, and it's okay because they started it. We're not children, It's not okay. If you're saying that this kind of discourse is not acceptable, it is never acceptable. It's like when my kids are fighting and they're, I come into bird calling Boo, mean name, and I'm like, what? No. And hers is, well, she called me this, and then Boo fires back, well, she did this, and I get the long back and forth of, this is where it started, and these are the levels of escalation. The question always is, well, but what should have you done when that happened? She kicked you off the Xbox. The answer is not to slap her. It's to come say, hey, I was playing, and she just, took the controller out of my hands. This isn't cool. When she calls you a doo-doo head, the appropriate reaction is not to call her a brat. It's, something was done that violates the rules of the household, you need to report it. That's the same thing here. When you engage in the back and forth with these people, you either have to do it from that high platform you're trying to keep everybody on, or you have to just disengage and report it. I think that allowing members of the community that are viewed as positive or progressive, or however you want to call them, that are viewed as the good guys, allowing them to skirt the rules, saying, well, but they were in a heated argument, so it's different, is kind of unacceptable. And I think you're just going to fuel the other side of that that issue. That it's going to appear more and more that it's not about appropriate behavior versus inappropriate behavior. It's not about right versus wrong. It's not about good versus bad. It's about making sure that certain people who have, the bat phone to WOTC never take exception to you. And that is a very, very dangerous precedent to set. And that is a very, very dangerous road to go down and will likely cause... I don't know if it would actually impact the player numbers a whole lot. Because you have to keep in mind, a lot of Magic players don't participate in this bullshit drama. So, yeah, I don't know that it would actually impact the game. It would impact content creation. It may have an impact on sanctioned events more. But I mean, all in all, you're disenfranchising a portion of your player base, and you're basically allowing some people to be lords of the community, but because they don't call themselves edgelords, it's okay. And that is what I don't want to see happen here. I have defended Jeremy in the past. I have defended points he's made. I have never agreed with everything that man said, but there are times where he has made valid points and they get dismissed because they're from him. I understand it, but I've tried to enforce those points that I agree with. I understand why a lot of people in the community take exception to him and don't like him and wanted this ban. I do. I get it. He can be very brutal. He can be very aggressive. He can be very hostile. But in all honesty, I hope somebody from WOTC is also keeping an eye on the side of the community that wanted this, and now that they got it, how they're interacting with him. That, even though he's not technically part of the community anymore, like officially, he's been told he's not permitted, you also can't ignore or allow people to continue to harass and degrade him. I think they need to maintain a standard that it is done, it's over, and leave him the hell alone. Because if you're going to allow, the professor's followers or Wedge's followers or any of their followers to engage in the behavior that apparently was mostly perpetrated by his followers and not himself, but he was attributed with kind of putting that out there, putting the idea out there, encouraging people or bolstering people to do these things, so that he is responsible for the actions of his followers. You need to hold that same accountability to these other factions. That it's still not okay to send him death threats or dox him or anything like that. And it's not okay to basically start shit with him on Twitter. Because it's really what this is all about, is smack talking on Twitter and shit. And okay, I get it. Cyberbullying is a form of bullying, and it does need to be taken more seriously. Especially in this country, the laws have not caught up with technology. So it's really hard to prosecute virtual harassment, virtual stalking. So I think taking a firm stance on cyberbullying is not a bad thing. But I think they need to universally enforce it. And that's what I want to see happen. But, I mean, honestly, until I'm seeing that not happen, I'm going to give them the benefit on this one. That they're trying to maintain the integrity of the community. They're trying to make sure the game is open and peaceful for everybody. And that's why they're taking this hard line, but they need to enforce it fairly and universally. They can't make exceptions for, well, I mean, you're a fan favorite, you're a well-liked pro player, and yeah, you took a couple shots, but, hey, they fired first. I don't think that's acceptable. I think if you're going to engage in, shit talking and everything else, instead of following the due process and reporting it and doing what you're supposed to be doing, that you should be sanctioned as well. Just like if some kid punches my kid at school, the expected behavior is that instead of hitting back, they report it and let the officials take care of it. If they throw a swing back when it was not necessary that they do, there is self-defense. But self-defense verbally is much different than self-defense physically. I think when somebody's like, screw you, you're a girl, for me to engage in toxic rhetoric in response is not as justifiable as if I'm walking to my car and I'm in an empty parking lot and somebody slams me up against my car and I mace them. I think that's acceptable. There was nobody around to do anything. There was not a cop standing there watching it. Physical self-defense is much different than verbal self-defense. You don't ever really need verbal self-defense. Yes, I understand that these things are upsetting and words can hurt. But at the same time, your life is not immediately being threatened. You need to report it. And honestly, screaming back at them is not going to make them stop. Being the bigger asshole isn't going to stop the problem. You're not defending yourself, you're aggressing back. So, this one's real short. This is all I'm really going to say on it. I understand why they banned. I feel the lifetime is somewhat heavy-handed, but that is their call, and I respect that. I just want to see these policies universally enforced. And don't harass anybody. Just don't do it. But you can't justify harassment with, well, he harassed this other person, so now I get to harass him. No. The behavior has been determined to be unacceptable. So it should be unacceptable for anybody to engage in. And that's my stance on it. I do want a kinder, gentler community. I do want the peaceful, welcoming community. But I don't want to see where people who, out of one side of their mouth, champion for inclusiveness and a happy, welcoming community, and then out of the other, shit talk on somebody that they have decided doesn't deserve the protection, doesn't deserve to be treated better than that because of the way they've treated somebody else, instead of reporting it, instead of following the due process. I think they should be sanctioned too. I don't think you should get to skirt around the code of conduct by, well, I was responding to other toxicity and being toxic in response. It's either acceptable or it's not. And that is my final stance on it. I do feel a bit bad for him because 0 to lifetime has got to be kind of a startle there. As far as Travis Wu's concerned, I don't really know this guy. I don't know that I really agree with that banning from the little bit I know about it, but I don't know as much about that because the focus has mostly been on the things with Jeremy. So if he got suspended simply for starting a Facebook group and or voicing support, like a guilt by association, I do think that's kind of wrong. But that's just my opinion. Ultimately, WOTC gets to do what they want here. They are the company. Your freedom of speech protects you from the government arresting you and prosecuting you and imprisoning you for things that you say. Your freedom of speech does not protect you from what a private company decides that they're going to do in response, so long as it doesn't violate your rights. You don't have a right to have a DCI number and play sanctioned magic. You don't have a right to an MTGO account. They are privileges, I guess, is the best way to put it. So that's where that's at. I want to believe this mess is over, but I really don't think it is. I think his supporters are going to get fired up, and I don't think this is the last of the bannings. And if his supporters do get fired up and people fire back, I think they should be held accountable. And that's my thoughts on it. So that's where we're at. As always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully this is it for this week, and I'll just talk to you all on Monday.